how do we make ourselves more relevant than the competition to the target audience? A very difficult topic, one that we're constantly working on, and I'll be sharing some of my experience in this, the things that have worked for us, the things that haven't worked for us. It's a great topic, one that I'm always interested in learning more, and I hope I can share with you.
People are what enable your scalability. By appreciating that fact and by creating great engagement and alignment with your people, your business is far more likely to be ready to scale, to attract those scalable opportunities, and when the time comes, to execute on them like champs.
If you don't know how much sales you expect to come in the next few months or years, how do you plan on getting employing the right number of people or getting the right assets to service that new revenue? Because if you employ too many people or invest in too many assets, you could go out of business or you could make significant losses. And if you don't get enough people or you don't invest in enough assets, you're going to lose the sale or you're going to destroy your reputation. So the only way to do that is to have a proper finance function in place.
So in fact, all companies have a strategy, even if they've never articulated it or written it out. And there are only two types of strategies: good strategy and bad strategy. Bad strategy will see you never achieve much, and most companies with bad strategy crash and burn or just limp along. Speed doesn't matter if you're going in the wrong direction.
If you're a startup, a founder wanting to scale your business, and to understand that scaling needs to be planned, it needs to be well thought through, and the impact that scaling will have, not just for your business, not just for your employees, but for your country and the world at large. You know, there's a saying that we believe in: changing the world one entrepreneur at a time, and we can do that through scaling.
Brilliant. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I think that was a really appropriate start for the first 2 or 3 minutes of today's conference. And I must say, from my side, from everyone at Outsource CFO, we're super excited to be here with you guys. We have close to 100 scale-up founders joining us today on the call, and I'm sure many more will watch the content being created today as they journey through their scale-up stories in 2021. So yeah, from our side, welcome. Maybe take the next 2 hours to really kind of like just focus, be present, just be here with us. We've really, I think, put together a cohort of amazing speakers who are going to wow and dazzle us today with some of their learnings and insight and core expertises that they've gained throughout many years of working in or running or growing or exiting the companies that they founded. So yeah, I think just from our side, so I think like just founders events, firstly, is just our way of engaging with the entrepreneur ecosystem in Cape Town and around the world to make sure that there's one place where entrepreneurs can get together, can spend time together, can think together about where they're going with their companies, what's next for them. Entrepreneurship can be a lonely journey sometimes. You can't speak to everyone in your life about what you're going through with your company. And this is just a place to connect with some of those founders who are also going through similar style things to just make connections, make friends, and journey together. We hope to really be able to do these events in person again also sometime soon. But for now, it's good to have all of you guys with us on the other side of the screen. So today's main conference is all about scaling up. We've really put together some of the heavyweights and thought leaders of the scale up journey together to chat to you guys. So we're excited to speak about this. I think It's it's more or less built on the scaling up book that Vern Harnish wrote, and it also draws from some of the other methodologies around basically everything that Jim Collins has ever written, and things like E-Myth Revisited and some of those kind of classic business books and business methodologies. And it's all around, I think, scaling up methodologies all around making sure that your people, your strategy, your execution, and your cash are all aligned. And we've structured the whole day around those kind of 4 core topics, which form the 4 pillars of scaling up. And I just want to read these core questions of those 4 pillars to you guys, because I thought this was really profound. For people, the core question is every person in the organization, every stakeholder and every employee and every investor happy and engaged? And would you rehire them? Like, would you have them on as part of the journey again? On strategy, it's basically, can you define your strategy simply, and is it driving sustainable growth within the organization? On execution, are all your processes running without drama, and are they generating industry-leading profitability? And then lastly, on cash, it's basically, do you have sufficient resources of cash, ideally generated from clients, to fuel the growth of the organization? So these are the 4 core questions around the 4 core pillars. And we've put together content for each one of those in terms of keynotes, panel discussions, and a whole bunch of different things to just spark your thoughts, to learn from some of the people who are really deep experts in that specific area of growing a company, and just to get your mind going around like what's next for your business, what to do next. So from my side, from all of us here at OCFO, welcome to today. Just before we jump in formally, I just have to say a big thanks to Peach Payments. We're going to be listening to Rahul for the very last session today. Peach Payments are the diamond sponsor of this year's Scale Up Con. So we're super excited to have you guys on board. Thank you for backing scale up entrepreneurs in this ecosystem, especially in a time like the present. We're very excited to have you guys here, and can't wait to hear more about that later as well. So then, without further ado, you guys didn't come to listen to me. You want to hear from all the brilliant speakers we've lined up. I'm going to ask Catherine to jump onto this screen with me. Catherine, are you here? Are you able to join me?
I'm here. Can you hear me okay, Lo?
Brilliant. Sounding good on this side. Thanks, Catherine. Guys, so we're very privileged to have Catherine here with us today. She's founded Think Room many years ago, and it's become a household name already, as has Grindstone, I believe, as one of the kind of flagship accelerator programs on the continent. So Catherine, thank you for sharing your time with us today. I know you have a busy schedule. So yeah, we're really keen to hear from you just around kind of your notes and your core learnings around accelerating scale-up companies on the continent. We're super stoked to have you. Over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lo. I'm so excited to be here, and it really is a wonderful conference. So allow me to engage with you over the next few minutes just to talk about scaling. And before I go into the detail, let's take 30,000 feet step back and just say what is the scaling about? Why is it important? We've really worked from a Think Room perspective, is the one that gave me the tally just yesterday, well over 13,000 entrepreneurs across the continent to date, and really from the smallest of the small to really scale-ups that are growing exponentially. Watch the space. We're going to be announcing a very interesting exit soon through Grindstone as well. But really, we've spanned the whole continuum from startup all the way through. And there always is this question about how do I scale, and how do I scale up in a way that's sustainable and that really the cash keeps up, the people keep up, the strategy sets the strategy and show how we should go. So as Lo said, I really want to touch for a minute or two on each of these 4 blocks, and I'm going to try and make it very practical. I'm going to try and share some of our experiences with you in terms of how we experience it across, especially Grindstone, because there we're working with companies very much post-revenue, and they are profitable, but to a place where they need to be more profitable and grow exponentially. I want to start with the people component. So when I speak about scaling in the context of people, I always say this is for me the most important part. And of course, depending on who you speak to, everybody will have a different view, but the people component for me is the most important one. And I tell you why. It brings energy or it takes energy away. There's no other way to explain it. And it really is about the people that work for you, the people you work for. So clients, employees, suppliers, partners. You know, it is really important that from a people perspective, you have this sorted, because this is what we see through scaling, the biggest Achilles heel if you don't. Here's the reality. We can try and be as kind and as nice as we are. But if there's a people specific relationship that's not working in your business, it's going to trip you up at some point. I have this saying, and I always say it. The first 10 people in your organization that you employ as a business owner will determine the culture of your organization until the end. Think about that. And if you think back about your own experiences, think about the team members that you have in your team that you've employed. Are they living the values? Are they living the purpose of exactly what you had in mind? And if not, can it be adjusted? And the reality is, if it can't be, staff churn, employee churn, I always say, needs to be a healthy 10 to 15% to continuously get new blood into the business. For those who work with me, I think they would know that the people I work with are the most important in my life. So I'm not coming from a doomsday perspective. I'm just coming from you as the owner of a business. You have a responsibility towards this entity to bring the best, to surround yourself with the best, and to show up as the best. And if there's something off with the people, it just has such an impact on revenue and on profits long term. So think about that. There isn't enough time to go into more detail about people. So I just want to say one small thing about partnerships, especially if you look at fundraising. If you're fundraising from a VC, or you're fundraising from an angel, or whichever part of your journey you're in, if you're fundraising, just remember that when you give equity, you're bringing a partner on board. And I always say, take your money as late as possible. And of course, give it away, at the least amount of equity as possible. But the people part of it, the partnership part of it, is the most important. We always say, when we look at funding a business, especially through Grindstone Ventures, in the first meeting, you'll know whether there will be a partnership or not. And then if there isn't going to be, move straight along. We have guts. We know that we have intuition, and it's not for nothing. So that's on the people part. And I always start with that when I talk about scaling, because for me, in my perspective, that really sets the framework. I want to talk about strategy next. So there's I'm not sure if it's an urban legend or whether it's real, but somebody spoke about meeting Raymond Ackerman many, many moons ago and asking him, so tell us what strategy is. And he had such a simple response to it. He said, strategy is not, as we know, the thick, the strategy planning session, and then the thick report that comes out goes into an electronic file and never comes out. It literally just is the what, the how, the when, the why. That's it. And depending on who you ask what strategies, you'll have different answers. Simon Sinek again says it's all about the why. And if you can get the why right, everything else just falls in place. Some others just say it's about your unique value proposition. The reality is your strategy is to you and your business what it means to you. It's not a specific way. Of course, there are tools and methodologies and approaches, but it's what you make of it. What I want to say specifically about strategy is that if you see Corona or not, COVID or not, we will always have one or other disaster coming our way, and we've got to be ready. If you see your top line revenue reducing consistently over time, please go and check your strategy. There's something there that needs adjustment. You've either not kept up with industry, you either have not kept up with competitor analysis, whatever that is. I'll use an example on strategy right now. One of our Grindstone companies had a small tweak in strategy when the pandemic hit. And because we were also, remember, we were also scared of pivoting too much, because disrupting the strategy too much and then having a very negative impact on the business. But what they did was they actually realized, looking back when COVID hit, this was June last year, they realized it was way beyond just the COVID impact. That was the last bit that pushed them to see that their revenue is truly declining. But they had seen this trend coming over a while, that revenues were declining. And there was one specific thing in their strategy that they did not keep in mind. Competitors were offering the same offer in a different way, not a cheaper way. And they had gently adjusted, COVID actually helped them and they could increase revenue. So that's always a sign. If revenue is decreasing consistently, you know you have to look at strategy. And of course, there are, as I said, there are many different ways of looking at that. I want to talk about the third element next, and that's the one of execution. I can remember throughout my career working through the pieces of execution. At a time, we had to build an execution model when we had just done the Chevron-Texaco merger. And it was so interesting to really, through all the readings today, and as we're experiencing today, execution still really is where the rubber hits the road. I'm sorry I'm giving you the cliche, but I can't put enough focus on it, because as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we're all so different. We have different skills. We have different sets of being comfortable, places where we like to play. And those places where we don't like to play, very often when we work with startups and founders, they are the ideators, or they are those who come up with the ideas or with all the magic. But the execution bit just truly bores them to death, as an example. And there's another rule that I have. So I'm literally too old to have to worry or care about growing too many of my weaknesses. I would much rather employ much better people who are much better at it, who are better than what I could ever dream to be, and literally let them light up those weaknesses that I have in a way that serves the business. So here's the thing, if you know there's something not right with the execution part of your business, you will see perhaps revenues are going. You are trying literally to get the profitability of the business up, but for some reason, the profitability is just not there. Why? Because we are doing things in a too long-winded way. We haven't got our execution methodologies down to a T. I speak for myself, mea culpa. I'm one of the worst when it comes to a stickler for detail, a stickler for making sure that it's perfect. And I often have to ask myself the question, execution in our business is so important, but I often have to ask myself the question, am I pushing that last 5%, which already should be at 120 in other people's standards in terms of delivery? And I really am not serving the business and impacting profitability. So think about that as a business founder right now where you are. Think about this thing of, are you the best at execution? Whatever that definition means in your business, in your industry, and compared to your competitors. And if not, are you surrounded by the best of the best who would do it much better than you or I would do it, and make sure that it is delivered? Because that's how you get things done much more efficiently and improve profitability. And at the end of the day, that's fantastic. The last thing I want to talk about is cash. And yes, of course, cash flow is the reality, and especially for those businesses who battled through COVID. One of our businesses, as an example, really, my own business is really battling a cash flow dilemma when COVID hit. And then the cash in the business gets into a whole different light, So the question here is about, how are you truly spending your cash? Do you work off a proper forecast, proper budget? And again, as I was shaking my head, I was thinking, oh goodness, the audience on the other side would probably thinking, how boring. But the reality is, we see a clear differentiator in our businesses that we take through acceleration in Grindstone, where they have a very tight handle on what money comes in, what money flows out, and how it does, than those who don't. Yes, of course, we can be successful despite ourselves. But for true scaling, this discipline needs to be in the business from the start. I can't tell you how much time we spend as part of our acceleration processes to get the businesses to focus on this component. And again, as a founder or an owner of a business, if that's not really what you want to do, get the experts to do it. That is truly would be the best money spent whilst you get at growing your business. So I just want to leave you with this scaling thought. My 10 minutes are up. I want to leave you with this the scaling thought. Remember, nothing improves your cash flow more than revenue. and reducing sales cycles. So getting more efficient and getting better at what you're doing. I wish you well. I would very much encourage you to look out for any of the brilliant programs around South Africa and the continent. There's so many different programs that you can join just to learn bits and pieces of scaling. And I want to close out with this. We cannot be all things to all people. We're not chocolate. We just can't be. And so we can't be all things to our business, but we can be darn good one at a time. So select out of the 4, the one piece that you really feel you fail in your business at right now in terms of strategy, people, cash, or execution, and work on that. Thank you so much, Lo.
Sure. Wow, Catherine. If there wasn't a live audience, you would have a loud applause right now. Thank you so much for being with us. That's an incredible summary and a great way to kick us off for the conference ahead. I'm sure everyone is fired up and ready for what awaits. Yeah, you just have a very good way to crystallize some of these core concepts, and we can hear that just that experience that you speak from in terms of helping entrepreneurs with the scale up journey. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Lo, and thank you for the conference. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Great to have you. Thank you. Okay, is Ian with us? Ian, can I ask you to jump on with me, please? If you'll just put your camera and your sound on, that we can get you in front of the audience.
There we go.
There we go. While Ian is jumping on with me, this, ladies and gentlemen, this is Ian Mann. He's one of the forerunners when it comes to strategy. This man has been in the strategy game for about 30 years. He founded a company called Gateways Business Consultants about 3 decades ago, and is involved in many other different ventures. And one of his core expertise is all around strategy. So how he was introduced to us recently was by a scale-up founder who said Ian has made a massive difference in terms of how they think about their growth strategy. So we've asked Ian to talk to us today about just, this is 2021. We're kind of in COVID, kind of post-COVID. Strategy is complex right now. So Ian, we want to ask you the difficult question, how do you carve out a strategy for your company in a year like this? The floor is yours.
Good, thank you very much. Have I got access? Yes, I can share my screen. Let me do that now. Right, can you all see this?
Perfect, there we go.
Good, perfect, okay. Firstly, good afternoon to you all. What I'd like to do is I just want to focus exclusively on the strategy method, and the strategy method, which I think is particularly useful in 2021, and that's what I'm going to lead you through right now. So let's have a look at this, please. Let's just talk about strategy. Everybody has different. I've been working in strategy for probably the last full-time for about the last 15 years, and before that, dabbling in it, and I've read everything I possibly can. I want to give you a quick potted view of this, and then I'll be able to unpack off a base as opposed to without having a common understanding. Most of the strategy work that was done in the 20th century and probably in the first decade of the century is what can best be described as the greenhouse tomato strategy. And let me explain what I mean by that. If you wanted to have absolutely perfect greenhouse tomatoes, what you do is you control, first you use a greenhouse, because that's going to allow you to control every single part of what's going on, everything from the temperature, from the light, from the nutrients that go in. You can keep the pests out. You can actually ensure that you have absolutely perfect tomatoes every time. When you take a greenhouse tomato strategy, what you're actually doing is this. You bring in some very, very smart people. Smart is terribly important here. Bring in smart people. Get them to analyze deeply what your situation is. How do you really grow tomatoes? What's the environment? What's the air required? What's the nutrients required, and so on. Get them to really understand what's going on. Then they say to you, where would you like to be in 5 years' time? And you say, I would like to be in this place in 5 years' time. And they analyze what the world will be like for your product or your service in 5 years' time. Having a good understanding of where you are now and where you'd like to be, what they will then do is they will develop a way of step by step, point by point, taking you to an absolutely perfect spot in 5 years' time, provided you follow the rules. That is the typical way of doing strategy. And I think it's important that we all understand that when people talk about strategy generally, that's usually what they're talking about. And I want to assure you that's absolutely incorrect. So let's have a look at what you can do as an alternative. I call that the greenhouse tomato strategy because what it presumes, like a greenhouse, that you can control all the factors. Now, if anything is going wrong in your greenhouse, the temperature isn't right, change it. The lighting isn't good, change it. Nitrogen isn't okay, change it. The reality is that you can't predict things as simply as that when you deal with businesses. So I would suggest that these three icons over here pretty much describe what business is like. And today, I think top left, I think if you're not confused, you probably don't know what's going on. It does for many people feel like there is a tsunami coming down on you. You see massive opportunities, but we need first and foremost to clarify ourselves, is this merely complicated or is this complex? And I think it's quite important that we differentiate between these two concepts because they're very different and the implications of them are going to make a big difference to you. The reason why I wanted to start off with talking about the greenhouse tomato strategy is because so often when people talk about strategies, they want to have a nice document, well articulated, clearly explaining what the situation is, clearly explaining where you want to be, and clearly explaining how you're going to get there. And that has got to be complete nonsense. So let's have a look at this. There is a difference between complexity and there is a difference between complexity is very, very different from complication. Let's start with complication first. When something is complicated, it follows, it's linear, it follows rules, it's predictable, you can plan it, you can manage it, you can control it, and you can literally get more efficient over time. Now, that's complicated. In the top right-hand corner, you'll see a picture of what was the Ford factory in its early days. That was pretty complicated for those days. On the left-hand side is an extraordinarily complicated manufacturing plant, motor manufacturing plant today. If you look at that, you can see the extraordinary complication of that. But it's not complex, it's only complicated. Because it's complicated, you can work it, you can understand it, and you can make it more and more efficient. We need to distinguish between these two concepts, complicated and complex. Manufacturing plants can be extraordinarily complicated, but it's not complex. Let's look at what complexity is. Complexity is very different. Complexity is not linear. Manufacturing plant, as a good example, is linear. Complexity is when a very small issue can have an outsized impact, and that's what makes it complex as opposed to complicated. Let me give you a good example. You see in the bottom right-hand corner, that's the Bank of England. The Bank of England is a seriously august organization made up of some very, very bright people. If they aren't the brightest of the bright, they'll be replaced by even brighter people. They have access to extraordinary amounts of information. They're being a major center around the planet of finance. They know an enormous amount. The Bank of England issued a statement a while back that fascinated me. The statement was, there will be a future banking crisis. There will be a future banking crisis. However, they don't know when and they don't know why. Now, these people understand the global system, which is why they know there's going to be a crisis. They don't know when and they don't know why. Now, is this because they lack brain power? Quite obviously not. Is it because they lack access to data? Obviously not. They've got as much data as anybody could possibly have. Why is it that they can't tell you why there'll be a banking crisis or when it will happen? Answer is very simple. The global system, of which banking is obviously a part, is extraordinarily complex. What that means is that there are multitudes of factors, and every factor influences every other factor. And none of the factors are controlled by any one person any one company or any one nation. Now, when you have a situation like that, the complexity that arises makes it impossible for you to deal with, even for Bank of England to get a handle on it. Let me just give you a quick example from supply chains. It's a lovely example. Supply chains are designed to make everything cheaper and simpler. Simple in the sense that it gets the job done as fast as possible. The design tries to reduce costs at every single point. And because they reduce costs at every single point, they are open to extraordinary number of possibilities for disruption. Supply chains are exposed to natural disasters, to labor disputes, to economic volatility, to social turmoil, to even religious strife, to trade wars. Anything, any one of those could interrupt a supply chain. You can have your supply chains absolutely perfectly organized, and there's a strike in the country, or there's a war, or there's a ship that goes through the Suez Canal and gets stuck. There's nothing on the ship that you need, except that one of your suppliers actually needs something on that ship which throws everything all out. The world we're living in is extraordinarily complex. Small things can have big impacts. You can even have some leader of a major country tweeting in the middle of the night demonically and affect the share price. So we need to understand that the world we live in today is not complicated, because that would be easy. It's complex. Small things make huge differences, and we have to understand that. Great. Given that, I wanted to share with you an image, and we'll come back to this image in a moment. Jim Collins used this image. He talks about the flywheel and the doom loop. So let me just give you a quick explanation to see where I'm coming from. That flywheel in front of you is on an axle, and it weighs 30 tons and is 20 meters wide. And that fellow in the bottom right, his job is to push the flywheel. Year one, he gets 1/4 revolution. Year two, now it's really heavy. So he's working for 8 hours. His colleague takes over 8 hours later. He comes back 16 hours later himself, and they keep pushing. They don't stop. In the first year, 1/4 revolution. Into the second year, a full revolution. In the third year, there are 3 revolutions. 5 years is 10 revolutions. And in 15 years' time, it makes it to the front page of Fortune magazine. That's called the flywheel. The flywheel effect is that it builds on itself and gets faster and faster and faster, and therefore uses less and less energy to make it move. That's the flywheel. What happens in business as relates to strategy is far less like the flywheel, and in my experience, far more like the doom loop. The doom loop goes like this. Managing director leaves, new managing director comes in. He says, gentlemen, ladies, we need to go away on retreat and we need a strategy. So you develop a strategy. There you are, you trying to work the strategy. In the first year, you get a 1/4 revolution in your strategy. Second year, you get full revolution. Third year, you get 3 revolutions. They're so excited with this new CEO, they promote him to the European office. New CEO comes in. He says, we need a strategy session. You have a strategy session, and he said, gentlemen, you're pushing the flywheel in the wrong direction. You're pushing it anti-clockwise, or pushing it clockwise. It's the wrong way. We got to go the other way, gentlemen. Other way, ladies. We've got to start again. So you spend the first year trying to bring the flywheel to standstill. Second year, you get a 1/4 revolution. Third year, you get 1 revolution. They toss the CEO out because he's just not cutting it. Bringing in a new CEO. He says, we need a strategy. He says, monodirectional. In these turbulent times, it's once this way, once that. 5 years later, 10 years later, the thing still isn't moving. The challenge is we've got to use the power of a flywheel, and we need to do it by consistently sticking, and this is odd, sticking with exactly what you've got to do year after boring year, month after boring month, and day after boring day. Let me show you what I mean.
Yeah, sorry, just a 1 minute warning, if that's okay.
Sorry?
Just a 1 minute warning, if that's right.
We have a problem. Okay. Was I allocated only 10 minutes?
Sorry, no, we just have a 10 minute slot, yeah.
Okay.
Is it?
I'm just trying to work out very quickly what we can do.
100%. We can give you an extra 2 minutes if you like.
Okay, let me quickly give you this. I want you to picture a retail clothing store catering to 25 to 35-year-olds. You want to create a strategy for them, which you can stick to year after year after year, and know that you will always be doing well. I went through an experience like the client did, so I can share this with you very quickly. We are not interested in looking at a strategy in the general sense of the word, which is where am I now? Where do I want to be in 5 years' time? That doesn't work at all. There are a couple of things that we do know. I can guarantee you that your future will look something like this with slight variations. I can put my money on it. I know it's going to happen. It'll be one of these four. Terrific, okay, oh no, or ouch. And there's nothing you can do about that. You're going to live through that. Given that could be the fact, you need to come up with a strategy which doesn't change irrespective of which one happens. That's what I call a functional strategy. A functional strategy is going to be based on how you need to function irrespective of what happens. Getting back to my idea of the clothing store, there are only three things that you have to worry about in the clothing store. It's a chain, a clothing store doing a particular type of business, and it's these three. You need to worry about seeing to it that you have long-term customers. Why do you need long-term customers? Because that'll allow you to do well with the next part, which is we need to be constantly relevant. If I don't have customers who are with me for a long time, I don't know what relevant is to them. If I am constantly relevant and I have long-term customers, I can buy well. Don't worry about selling well. If you get these three things right, you will be selling well. The idea is to identify what are the three things that will make your business work. That if you consistently work at those things, you will always really do well. The beauty of having something which is as clear as a functional strategy, which takes a while to get to, it doesn't come quickly, but it's really worth the mental effort of trying to get to it, is what's going to help you achieve consistency and get that flywheel moving year after year after year. And I think that's all I can tell you at this stage. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought I'd have half an hour and I'd be able to take you through exactly how to develop this as well.
Oh man, Ian, I'm so sorry we have to cut you short. I know there's a lot of golden nuggets within this. We'll think about doing a strategy session separately at some stage soon. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate your valuable time. Mike, I see you with me here. Can I ask you to join me on the stage, please?
Yeah, I'm here. How's it going?
Hey, Mike. Great in yourself.
Cool. Can you see me? It says it's asking me to start my video. Can you see me fine?
I can see you perfectly clear. I'm sure you're
right.
live.
Cool.
Okay. Well, Mike, we'll gonna maybe push our break a slight bit later. Then we can give you your proper full allocated time space. So don't feel under pressure, because I know you also have a lot of great content always in your sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, Mike Scott, all the way from Adelaide. Mike, what's the time there on your side at the moment?
It is bedtime for me. It is 9:10 in the evening. So if I fall asleep, my apologies.
No. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your willingness to always share this wonderful journey that is the founding journey of Nona. It's great to watch you. And if you don't follow Mike on LinkedIn already, you absolutely have to. We asked Mike to talk to us about strategy in a remote work, because Mike runs this company from Australia, and most of his business was founded in Cape Town, and currently his people are operating all over the country and all over the world. So Mike, over to you.
Great, thanks, Lo. Firstly, my apologies for the cap. I had the worst haircut of my life, so I'll spare you from having to look at me with a terrible haircut. So just some background very quickly. I moved to Australia in March 2019, and the rest of my team of around 30 is in South Africa, with one person in the Netherlands. The talk I was asked to deliver would normally take me 30 minutes, and I only have 10, and I will not take more than 10 minutes. So I hope you are used to listening to 2 times audio speed on Audible, because that's what this is going to feel like.
Thanks, Mike.
I was asked to speak to the founder that wants to adopt a remote-first strategy to operate and grow their company. So here is my advice. Don't do it. Okay. Business is just people doing stuff with other people. And people, for the most part, need real live human interaction. So we adopted what we called a remote second approach. What does this mean? It means building a business that strives for people to be together whenever they can, but also that has the infrastructure not to need it. Okay, so understand that remote work and remote leadership are two very different things. What do these things actually look like? Just getting the work done remotely, here's some stuff you should consider. Your home setup for your staff should be taken very seriously by your company, and there should be a good budget for people taking advantage of good internet, good desks, good chairs, good monitors, etc., especially if you're employing knowledge workers. Enough communication, but not too much communication. This is an art and this needs to be done right. Get very good at meetings, or just don't have them. And here are some things that we've learned about meetings. If you don't have an agenda, don't have a meeting. Make sure that the expectation and the outcomes of the meetings are clear before you have it. Start the meeting on time every time. Try as best you can, especially if you're a founder, to have equal talk time. If you're a founder, the chances are you probably hog the meeting. That's not effective. Aim for equal talk time. Have a timekeeper so that the different sections get done properly, and end the meeting on time every time. Never let a meeting run over. Okay. Remote leadership is much harder, right? What does remote leadership look like? A friend of mine who I interviewed on the podcast, his name's Paul Galades. He started Yuppie Chef. He now has a company called Names and Faces. He shared some amazing wisdom with me. And he said, Mike, a CEO or a founder only has two jobs. The first one is to set the vision and bring people along with you. The second one is to make sure you're never the smartest person in the room. Okay, but what does that look like? So for me, when I moved to Adelaide, and I was 9 hours ahead of everybody else, and I was the only person in this continent with my whole team back in South Africa, I learned to communicate 3 times more than I thought was enough. When I was doing 3 times more than what I thought was enough, that was usually about actually enough. What does this look like? Every Monday, I send a 5-minute video to my whole team. It's about my focus for the week. It's about my learnings from the previous week. It's about notable meetings that are coming up this week. It's about content I'm consuming, and it's about something that's not related to work. So at the moment, I'm nerding out on a CCTV system for my house. Share that. Never more than 5 minutes, sent over WhatsApp. We have a company-wide stand-up every week. The company-wide stand-up is revenue sharing, profit sharing, shout-out sharing, project updates, people news, and a question at the end that allows everybody to interact really quickly. Daily huddle with my leadership team. Weekly 2.5 meeting with my leadership team. Quarterly planning, now that we're in a remote world, 5 days, 3 hours a day. Nona report to deliver what we discuss and decide on the quarterly planning. I also set what we call occasional comms sessions. Occasional comms sessions are, the whole company gets invited. You don't have to come to it. I'll post a couple of topics and we just talk. It's basically like an ask me anything thing. You don't have to come. You can talk about whatever you want. I also try to do one-on-ones with every single person every quarter. I don't always get to this, but I try very hard. These are not retros. These are not performance appraisals. These are just connecting with the people that I work with. I have 27 questions that I try and ask them. I try not to talk, which is hard for me. I try to just listen, but it's about sensible, smart questions to get to the nub of what's going on with everybody, to support and to take action against that. The last thing on this side is that we need to be very, very clear about who is accountable for what. It needs to be shared. It needs to be transparent. We follow the EOS methodology, and there's an amazing tool called the accountability chart, which is kind of like an org chart, except it lists responsibilities, not people. The last thing I want to speak about is differentiating your employee offering. In a remote world, this is particularly important. Remember that business is just people doing stuff with other people, so the team with the best team wins. Values. Do you know your values? Are they meaningful? Will you hire, fire, reward on your values? Does everybody know what they actually mean and how it guides how they show up every day? Your vision. Do people understand what they are doing today and how what they're doing today helps with the company? Do they see the connection? The stuff needs to be repeated and repeated and repeated. As they say in sales, you only hear something for the first time after you've heard it 8 times. What can you offer that the other guys can't? Remuneration is important, but it's not everything. Will people learn more at your company? Will they get access to cool projects at your company? Will they be treated better? Will they be granted more autonomy, more mastery, more purpose? There's a great book on that by Dan Pink called Drive. What perks can you offer and how are they delivered if they're remote? What are you doing about healthcare? How seriously do you take mental health? How do you provide coaching? Do you provide retirement annuities? What are you doing for physical health? What are you doing for financial health? How are you helping the people in your business? You probably can't afford all of these things, but we need to be thinking about how we get better and better at this stuff. The last thing is around the marketing side in a remote business, is that we're a services business, so I can only speak to services. For us, it's all about changing the mindset of how people view us. If people view us like a vendor, then we just take orders and we don't differentiate. If people view us like an expert, then they view us as a guide. The way that we get to expert status is we speak and we write. So we create content. It's difficult to do that in a remote world. So you've got to think about the strategy of how are you going to create the relevant content that puts you into a thought leadership status. For us, this looks like LinkedIn. We have a very solid strategy on LinkedIn. We're very consistent. We're very relevant. We also have a podcast that is very focused. We're actually about to start a second podcast with a very different focus. Be focused about the stuff. Write articles that are well SEO'd and are relevant to your audience, and get speaking engagements where relevant. That is me. I hope you retained even 5% of what I just said. I hope I'm under the 10-minute time. If you want to get in touch with me, the best way to do that is LinkedIn. My name is Mike Scott. Low, did I go over the time?
Mike, that was perfect. It was 200 kilometers an hour, but it was incredible. Thank you so much. Luckily, these sessions are being recorded. So we're going to find a tool that can do like 0.75 times speed so that we can all go through Mike's wisdom again and figure out how are we going to do this in the next 5 years of our lives. Mike, thanks so much for laying it all out for us. It's incredible to watch your journey. Thank you for sharing all of it on LinkedIn, on the podcast. We really enjoy following you. And thanks for contributing to this ecosystem. All the best to you guys at Nana.
Thanks for having me, Lo. Love the work you're doing. Cheers, everybody.
Sleep well, champ. Sleep well. Okay, guys. So that is strategy. I think we've ended it off with a nice bang. The next session we're doing is on people, and we've decided to put a couple of people on the screen for you guys for this session. So we're doing a people management journey conversation. So I'm going to ask Donna and Tim and Rose to all join me online. I'm very excited to have all of you guys here. It's just by way of introduction, Donna Pretorius is one of the co-founders at Outsource CFO, and he's also the director in charge of the people function. And he's going to be leading our conversation for the next little while. Mr. Timotino runs Intembeco Investment Administrators. They've been a long-term client of ours, and Tim leads about 100 people, very close to 100 people at the moment, on an incredible journey for the last couple of years. Tim, so good to see you, so good to have you. And Rose is from Virtue HR Solutions. She's an HR expert, and she's advised dozens and dozens and dozens of founders on creating a good people function within the company. So without further ado, Don, I'm going to hand over to you to take us away. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you so much, Lo, and for those kind introductions. Tim, Rose, it's so amazing to have you on this platform.
It's lovely to be here, Dana.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, wonderful. So for the audience, I'm really looking forward to these golden nuggets. We're going to climb straight into it. We're going to cover 3 themes. Our topic for today is the people management journey, and I'm really looking forward to hear the insights from our panelists here today. I'm going to start off with our first theme. The first theme is about A, B, C, and D players, and that's our staff members, and how you can motivate B, C, and D players to become A type of players. So Tim, I'm going to jump straight into my question. I'm going to give the first one to the floor to you. Tim, as a director, should you spend the same amount of time on a B, C, or D player than you would typically spend on a type of player?
So thanks, Dana. I suppose that is a fantastic question. The most romantic answer to that is yes, you should spend time on everybody, right? But the reality is that that's really not practical. And in a business like ourselves, which isn't massive, so just under the 100 people, like Lo said, right? That just isn't practical for the senior managers to be able to do. And then on the flip side, right, the catchy side of things, I would say, no, only spend more time on the A players. But the reality is, although I understand that makes a lot of sense in some ways, and create your circle of excellence and make sure that you really are protective of that development, the reality is that you then leave a lot on the table, because by not focusing on the others, you're putting them in boxes, you're putting ceilings in place, and ultimately you're probably just going to create some people issues down the line. So my answer, and which I think would fit most organizations, is that senior leaders need to understand where the biggest people development levers are, right, in the business. And then you need to pull on those as strongly as you possibly can. So for most businesses, right, the biggest lever in my mind are those sort of team leaders in our space, or first line managers, right? Because effectively through them, right, you have access to the people development of pretty much everybody else. So as a senior manager, right, and if I just think of our head of ops at this stage, she's responsible for about 40 people, right? Could she possibly develop each one of those 40 people and spend time with all of them? No. But what she could do really well is develop her 4 team leaders, right? And through the 4 team leaders, right, if you do that really well and there's an explicit understanding that their role is to develop the people in their teams, all of a sudden that the time spent on those 4 individuals touches 40 individuals, right, in the broader part of the team. And so I suppose I know that there are a variety of additional sort of talent management tools that you can use, and then there's lots of fancy things that you could do. But if you could only do one, then I suppose my piece would be focus on those team leaders that are then going to touch and develop everybody else, and thereby turning those who want to from those B, C, D players into the A players.
Well, Tim, what I'm hearing is management to spend time with senior management or top management directors, to spend time with them so that there's a DNA transfer, a value transfer, and then for them to then also spend time with the colleagues that work on their project. A great feedback
Absolutely.
from that. Rose, I want to direct, and I want to go a little bit into a different direction here. So all of us, we want to get the right people on the bus, and then we want to those amazing people on the right seats, and we actually want those staff members to be happy and really happy at our firm. From a business point of view, how important is it for management to evaluate that staff happiness? And from your expertise, what would you say are typically the things that really make staff members happy?
So some companies will need more than others to measure happiness levels. With some companies, as you can see with Mike Scott, if you are keeping abreast with doing check-ins with your staff members, your management team is doing the same, then you might not need to measure happiness because this is something that is intuitively happening as you go. However, what we have discovered is the pulsing concept. We do weekly pulses to touch base on things like sentiment, energy levels. We ask employees to link business goals and skills that they're developing with sentiment and energy levels, for example. And that is working really well. It does help for HR to take that function from founders in order to do check-ins and see how things are going. And for us to be able to red flags quite like on the spot, because it's a weekly exercise. We know with small companies, we work with very fast-paced environments. Things can get old really quickly. So if we are able to touch base on a weekly basis with employees, then we know that we're on top of things. Now, having said that, if we are to see, something that works very well for happiness levels in a company, is listening time. So be it from a founder, being from the HR team, we need to give our employees listening time in order to know that they can express themselves. So by expressing themselves, then we know if there's resources that are needed, or if we need to create awareness in improvement areas, or create awareness to the management team on things that they're finding difficulty in. So that's very much what increases happiness levels in an organization.
Stu, Rose, what stood out for me is that that energy levels and checking in with staff members on that. It's almost like if you don't have the right energy, then you don't have capacity to do projects, and then efficiency goes out the window. So truly great feedback from you.
So true. Let me just delve a little bit more on that. On happiness levels, I would say, energy is key. So I would say measuring things like sleep, what you eat, those are measures that really impact work more than what we could, think of happiness levels as of like a happiness status inside of you. Yeah. So those are things that, you get watches to measure these things, and you can get very smart about understanding yourself through these very basic measures.
Perfect. On the theme of A, B, C, and D players, so just to explain it, on the Y axis, we have our company values. And on the x-axis, we have like, for instance, productivity of staff members, and we're able to map where A, B, or C staff member is based on this. Obviously, A type of player is someone that's a great culture fit, with great attitude and great ambitions, and that whose productivity is also amazing. And then a B and C staff member is not quite there yet. It might not be that they buy into the culture, they might have an attitude problem, or their productivity is not where you want it to be. Tim, next question is to you. So obviously we want to encourage these B, C, and D staff members to become A type of player. So how do you, as director, how do you motivate those type of staff members, B, C, and Ds, to become A players in your business from your experience?
So then I'm not convinced that you can force somebody to grow into something else, right? And by encourage, I think that as a leader, what you should be doing is helping your colleague align what they want and what the business wants, right? Yes. And in my mind, I think alignment is really the goal, and that's going to be different for everybody. So understanding the person's why, right? So their purpose and their reason for being. Right. And I love the fact that Rose said some listening time, because that listening time, if you don't really understand and listen to each of those individuals, then you won't understand their why. And then it's going to be very hard for you to help sort of make alignment between that individual's personal development as well as the businesses. And then I think it's also important that you must remember that everybody's why and their motivational triggers are completely different. For some, it's the purpose of the business or the narrative of the business. Some it's achieving great things as a team. Some it's about legacy. Some is about money. Some is about title, right? Or some simply just about creating some form of stability at home and for their family. And whatever their motivation for growth is not something that you can give somebody, right? You can only help people sort of connect the dots. And I think that's really what should be focused on.
And Shu, what an amazing opportunity is to mentor someone in their lives, helping them with their growth journey. So much thanks for that, Tim. That alignment really stands out for me. Rose, I'm going to direct the next question to you. So I've heard with the scaling business, it's important that top management grow at a faster pace than the business is growing themselves. So from a growth aspect, I would love to hear your thoughts. Why is it so important that the directors, that the top management also have a growth journey for them individually?
So I'm a firm believer that we all learn through experiences. There's theoretical learning that you can learn from, like, for example, a degree. But then in order to gain real skills in life, I think the best way is to apply yourself in action. So this will relate both to employees and also to managers. So to give an example, if you have an employee that is going through a kind of growth in the role, they're going to, let's say, take from 5 clients to manage 10 clients in a year time. And you've done that type of growth, let's say 5 years ago, you've been through that experience. Then you're the right person to be able to, teach this person and then be able to coach this person on how to go and do this qualitative jump in terms of responsibilities, because you can relate and because you know exactly what resources are needed, you know exactly the type of challenges that person is facing at the moment. So then you are positioned to be someone that can grow the person because you have grown yourself at the same rate in the past. So that's why it's important for senior management to also grow themselves in their skill set, because that's the way that you will be bringing people with you during that path. And that's the nice thing about development, that there's endless opportunities and endless ways that one can develop. So for one particular thing, you might be the best mentor, and then for other particular skill sets, someone else will be a great mentor in the business. And it's just nice to see how everybody will take on their own particular direction and taking from different people, different experiences that they've gone through life.
Perfect. So for the audience out there, anyone who's a business owner or so, put quality time aside for your own personal growth, read books, learn from other peers, look at some accelerators out there, brainstorm with like-minded individuals, reach out to Tim and Rose on LinkedIn on all of that to get their input on that, and make your own growth a priority. So we're going to move on to a next theme, and this theme is based on recruitment tactics and strategies in a highly talented and competitive environment. So all know that you need to get great people on the bus and the right people then on the seats, and culture trumps strategy, and love them or they will leave, all of those principles. But Rose, I've got a quick question for you. Firstly, on the thing about recruitment, on the whole thing, recruitment, when must a scaling business consider to recruit themselves, or when must they consider to outsource that function?
That's a great question. So we provide recruitment as an outsourced company, and we average about 20 to 30 hours of work to do a recruitment exercise. And that would be because we already have the templates for, job ads, and we have a model to work out interview questions. We have the written assignments, so everything is done there for us. I would say if you're to start a recruitment exercise from scratch, it will take a founder about 50 hours of work. So I think it's very much doing the math there, taking what's your hourly rate multiplied by 50. Does it make sense to recruit in-house, or you need to outsource that function? Having said that, recruitment is, it's a complex game. I have had to, get on recruitment warranties because the recruitment exercise identifies someone as the best candidate that wasn't, and that can happen. I'm a firm believer that there's, as many recruitment is complex as many people are out there, because we are dealing with people. We all have different motivations. We can dress a story because we have needs, but at the end of the day, we're really not aligned, and because our maybe circumstances changed and things like that. So recruitment is complex. You might find that the first CV that came through, was a great candidate, and you onboarded this person, and this has been your employee for 10 years, and everything worked out well. But I might say that's seldom the case. And there is a very strategic way to about recruitment. And I would say when you outsource that, you are going to be getting the best in the industry out there, mostly for technical recruitments where there's very specific skills that you're looking for. I would say outsourcing is always the way to go.
Thank you so much, Rose. My last question is going to go to Tim before I hand over back to Lo. Tim, my question for you, some final tips from your end for strategies for staff retention that you would be keen to share with the audience.
So I think what is really important is for everybody to have taken and listened to Mike Scott's conversation, because I think that some of the things he mentioned are really practical ways in which people could be engaged and really enjoy the experience at the place that they work. I suppose from a different perspective, I don't think staff retention is a few tools. I don't think it's necessarily just pay, right, or the development. I really do think that staff retention is a mindset, and I think that mindset, right, comes from a few things. The foundation of that mindset is, one, respect of your colleagues; two, treating people as you would like to be treated, and then three, being really transparent, as transparent as you can responsibly be as a business leader. And how practically that sort of can work out is, I suppose, all of those things sort of think about communication. If you're really communicating well, and again, I think Mike's example is a great one, right? And you're doing all of the above, it means that everybody at least understands what the business is trying to do or aspiring to achieve. It means that everybody has an understanding of the potential challenges that the business is facing. It means that when there's an issue, everybody has got the opportunity to solve it, and there's that listening time and listening opportunity that's so important that Rose mentioned, right? And that if there's a tough decision, right, regardless of whether people like it or not, people understand where the tough decision has come from. And I suppose if you were doing those things really well and you took a step back, right, you could ask people, do they feel like they're working to achieve something special as a team, which is great, and actually I think will create staff retention, right? Or do they feel that they're working to help you achieve something special? And to be honest, that's not so great, because the one they invested in personally and they engaged with, and the other one, actually they could walk away from very easily, because that's something special to you, not necessarily something special to them. And I suppose I use that as an example. The reality is that if you use those things as a mindset, so that respect and treating people as you would and being transparent, the reality is that your decision making around things like balance, work-life balance, remuneration, your budgetary spend, what types of clients you bring on, right? All of those things will filter into that and ultimately make the space that individuals work in a better or worse one, right? And those are going to be then the key things that keep people around and have them invested in the business.
Thank you so much, Tim, for those golden nuggets. There you have it, guys. Tim Multino, the Managing Director of Intimbeco, and Rose Alcock, the HR partner at Virtue HR Solutions. Reach out to them via LinkedIn to take the engagements further. Tim and Rose, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate your inputs.
Thank you, Dana.
Thanks, Rose. Thank you, Donna. Thank you for leading us. I really appreciate that. Joining me on screen, please. Guys, we're very excited about this next keynote that's coming up. We've got Uwais Asmal, who's the head of advisory at Outsource CFO, who's going to lead us in a keynote that he's specially prepared for this session here today. We're really excited to hear him speak. It's about the profit first methodology that's really been taking the entrepreneur world by storm over the last while, where I think the concept of entrepreneurial poverty, where founders build companies for 8 or 10 or 12 or 15 years, but they never start that process of actually figuring out how to take proper money out of the business. And as a result, the founding team remains kind of like financially constrained over a long period of time, because all money gets plowed back into the company, saying that it's kind of fueling growth. But at the end of the day, it's not always necessarily that. It's maybe just a lazy excuse for not figuring out how to properly set aside profit. So Uwais is going to take us through a rock solid methodology that Mike Michalowicz out in America coined for the first time, and we're very keen to hear what he has to say for us. Uwais, over to you, sir.
Thanks so much, Lo. Welcome, everybody. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen because I've prepared a little bit of a presentation. Okay. Can you all see my screen? Lo, if you don't mind, just letting me know if you can see the screen.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, perfect. So my presentation, welcome everybody. My presentation is about Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. And it's difficult to summarize a book into 20 minutes, but into 10 minutes, sorry, but I'm sure I'll give it my best. So before we jump into the book, let's talk about the Mark Cuban stimulus plan. So most of you will know him, but if you don't, who is Mark Cuban? So Mark Cuban is an American billionaire, entrepreneur, and investor, and his net worth is estimated at $4.3 billion. He's also one of the shark investors on Shark Tank, for those who don't know. So what is his stimulus plan? And let's talk a little bit about that. So his stimulus plan, it consists of 20 rules that will get him to invest in your company. And I'm only going to focus on 3, but practically only 1. And his one rule is the business must be profitable within 90 days. Another one is a business must cash flow break even within 60 days. And you can't break even on a cash flow basis without being profitable. So if you want Mark Cuban to invest in your business, you need a profitable business. So I'm going to mix it up a little bit. Instead of talking about the book, I'm going to talk about the biggest mistakes when applying the book. But you might be saying, always, you're talking about the mistakes, but you haven't explained the concept yet. So I'll explain it a little bit, and then I'll talk about the mistakes. So a quick profit first lesson. The main thing about profit first is setting up 5 separate buckets: an income bucket, a profit bucket, a tax fund, owner salaries, and operating expenditure, in that order. And those buckets must be separated into separate bank accounts. So you might ask me, what are you talking about, Ways? How does the money flow? And I have a bit of a diagram to show you that. So all the income that comes from all of your clients goes into one account, the income account. And you don't pay OPEX from your income account. You allocate from your income account a little bit into profit, a little bit into tax, a little into owner salary, and a little bit or the remainder into OPEX or operating expenses. Practically, that's all you do. You never pay anything else from your income account. Your income account is there to receive money and to split it into the different categories. The reason being is you're going to only use your operating expenses account to pay your expenses. You're not going to pay operating expenses from any other account. You're going to have a smaller pool of funds to work with. The whole point of Profit First is about setting up a structure to help, because as business owners, you all have this habit of, I plan my expenses based on the money that I have in my account. So if you're only planning it on what's in your operating expenses account, you might think differently and become more efficient with your money. So let's talk about these mistakes that are made when people try to apply the profit first methodology. And the first mistake is going it alone. The profit first is not, it's a simple method, but you are your biggest enemy in applying it. When you start taking money from your tax account or your profit account to start paying for operating expenses, you shouldn't be doing that, but sometimes you're tempted. If you've got an accountability partner to watch you, you will make sure you will reap the benefits of profit first. Too much too soon. So what do I mean by that? So profit first requires you to set different target allocation percentages for each section, so for each bucket. So every time you get, or when you make payments into your different buckets after you receive cash from your clients, a percentage goes to profit and a percentage goes to tax. But if you set too high of a percentage going to profit or to tax, you won't have enough money to pay your salaries. You won't have enough money to pay your OPEX. So you cannot apply your target allocation percentages straight up. You need to work from where you currently are and work gradually over, and it's not over a few days, it might not even be over a few months, gradually to move from your current position to your target position. So you cannot go from 0 profit to 20% profit in 1 quarter. That's not possible. You can, because you're always going to end up, I need money for something else. I need to go back to my profit account and take money to pay OPEX. So you need to apply slowly. After you set your goal, you calculate what's your current allocation percentage. And every quarter you move from your current allocation to your target. And he specifically points out that you only move by 1% at a time. So if you didn't have any profit before, in the next quarter, you're going to have 1% profit or 2% profit. We're not going to jump 10% in a quarter, because if you could do that, everybody could do that. It's important to start slowly, because moving slowly will force you to look for better ways to be more efficient. And it won't tempt you to throw in the towel, because it's not necessarily the easiest way if you've been making losses to all of a sudden make profits. But if you're doing it slowly, 1% at a time, it becomes easier to achieve. And that's what you need to do. Mistake 3 is, I like the idea of profit first, but I want to grow my company. So too many entrepreneurs think you can only have one. You can either have profit or you can have growth. And what the book and what this book and profit first methodology points out is profit and growth go hand in hand. Growth without profit is actually making you poorer, because you're making losses. Who's spending that money? You're making yourself poorer. Then you might tell me, but whereas Google and Facebook have done it. Now I'll tell you, yes, the Springboks have also won the World Cup. So does that mean that I can also win the World Cup? These are exceptions. That's why they are on the toilet. That's why they are famous. Some companies have been going from funding round to funding round for the last 10 years without making a profit. And then you ask yourself the question, if you've been making losses for the last 10 years, who's winning? You're not winning, you're making losses. Maybe the suppliers are winning, but it's not you if you've been making losses for the last 10 years. Some of you want to grow at all costs. At all costs means you are one of those costs, if you think about it. If your profit comes first, your business will automatically show you that path to growth. So commit to profitability from day one. Mistake number 4 is cutting the wrong costs. Not all costs should be cut. You need to invest in assets and costs. Assets and costs that bring more efficiency to your business. Costs that allow you to get more results at a lower cost per result should not be cut. If a cost makes it easier to get better results, you should keep those costs or purchase those costs by buying the asset, as an example. You'd rather consider different costs or discounted options or services, but don't sacrifice efficiency in the name of cost savings. Don't cut the wrong costs. The next mistake, applying back or reinvesting. Entrepreneurs like to use these fancy words. I'm reinvesting in my business. I'm applying back the profits to cover my expenses. And all you're doing is you're taking money away from your profits to pay expenses. In a profit first methodology, that means you're taking money out of your profit account and putting it in your OPEX account. And that's a big no. This only happens if you are allocating too high a profit or too high a owner salary in a profit first methodology. So don't plow back or reinvest. Set the right targets and move towards the right targets, and you will start making profits. If you do not have enough money in your OPEX account, this bank account that you've set up to cover expenses, that's a big red flag. That means your expenses are too high and you need to fix them. I know that sounds easier said than done, and you don't think you can reduce your expenses. But let's take a look back to April and May 2020, when with the impact of COVID, you managed to adjust your expectations, you managed to adjust your budget during difficult times when revenue was decreasing, when you were taking hits on your revenue. So if your revenue is staying the same, you can also reduce your expenses within reason, of course. And you proved it to yourself before. Mistake number 6 is raiding that tax account. So you have a tax account that you've been putting money into, and now all of a sudden you just want to take money from a tax account to pay OPEX. That's a big mistake. Number 1, you won't have money to pay SARS. If you don't have money to pay SARS, penalties and interest for underpayment, and I mean, that's 20%, those are big numbers. And if you do manage to pay SARS, that means you took money from somewhere else. So you took money from your OPEX to pay SARS. Now you don't have money in your operating expenses account to pay your operating expenditure. So do not take money out of your tax account to pay for anything but tax. You only take money out of your tax account after you paid SARS, and the remainder goes to profits. It's never for paying expenses. And something to keep in mind, and entrepreneurs don't necessarily like this, but as your profits grow, your taxes will grow. It's a side effect of a growing business. Yes, you don't want to pay too much, but you have to pay as your profits keep growing, your taxes are going to keep growing. So please keep that in mind. Any healthy business, the tax keeps growing as the profit grows. Mistake number 7 is adding too much complexity. The profit first methodology is simple. Set up these 5 bank accounts: an income account, a profit account, a tax account, owner salaries, and operating expenses. And in the online banking system that we've got today, you can actually rename those accounts in the online banking so you know which account is which, and you're not trying to figure out which account is which. It's not complex, it is simple. It's easier than losing weight, and losing weight is simple. Eat well and exercise. That doesn't mean it's easy, but it's simple. And this is easier than losing weight if we think about it from that point of view. Mistake number 8, skipping the bank accounts. What I mean by that is some people say, okay, I'm not going to open the bank accounts. I'm going to apply profit first methodology, but I'm going to create balance sheet accounts on my trial balance and not open the bank accounts. This is a no, because you know that you make decisions on whether you can pay expenses or not, on how much money is in your bank account. If you've only got one bank account, you're watching that bank balance in that one bank account. Some of you check it every day. So, but you're not checking your balance sheet every day. So it's best if you must set up each bank account, and instead of watching your full bank account, you're now watching your OPEX bank account every day, because that's the bank account that you're going to be paying out all your different expenses. So don't skip opening the different bank accounts. That's key to the profit first methodology. So coming back to how we mentioned at the beginning, setting up those 5 bank accounts: income bank account, profit, tax, owner salary, and operating expenses. Now you'll notice that I did not say how much you need to allocate to each one. The book gives examples, but each business is different, and you need to find the right allocation for your business. You're going to start from where you are, and you're going to move slowly from where you are to where you want to be. And it might be that on your journey to where you want to be, you might realize that my initial thought of where I wanted to be is maybe too high for my business. So initially I thought that a profit percentage of 20 was for me. You might end up at 10 and saying, okay, this is actually good for a sustainable business, and my business can run perfectly at this level. But have a look at the book, and it will also give you a guide. Now you might ask me, ways, what if I'm making losses? My question to you is your business sustainable? If you are making losses, then start with a 1% profit, just a 1% profit. Small steps. Remember, coming back to my Mark Cuban stimulus plan, your business must be profitable within 90 days. 1% profit is profitable. So start small, start at 1% profit if you've been making losses, And if you haven't been making losses, then you just push it up by 1%. And it's managed, the profit first methodology, you manage it on a quarterly basis. So every quarter you push it up. Going back to my Mark Cuban stimulus plan, it must be profitable within 90 days. Thank you very much. If you do want more information, please have a look at the book. I hope I was in my time low.
Brilliant, Uwais. Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you so much. That was a really good summary. I love what you did with it in terms of the mistakes founders make when trying to apply this. Guys, if you're new to Profit First methodology, like Uwais said, like spend the time, listen to that book or read it. Have a look at the website. There are some really cool 10% tools, and maybe then chat to Uwais about how one can apply this within your company. We're super excited about helping founders create profitable companies while they scale fast. That's really exciting. Thanks, Uwais. Appreciate it, champ.
Thanks so much.
Okay, I'm going to ask Lazan to join me on the stage now. Guys, we're excited to have Lazan Ubad from the Outsource CFO team here as well to guide us through this last session on the numbers. Lazan, if you'll just jump on with me. There we go. Brilliant. So good to have you. Thank you for making time in your busy schedule. Guys, Lazan has been with the Outsource CFO team for many of its years, for most of its years, as we've run the company. She's the senior most CFO consultant on the team. Lazan has spent decades in the finance industry, and she really absolutely knows her stuff. Every single founder that she works with have only ever had brilliant things to say. Lazan, thank you for being here with us today to share some of your wisdom. I'm excited to chat to you.
Thanks, Lo. Great to be here, and thanks for all those kind words. I appreciate it.
Great. No, sincerely meant, and they're absolutely accurate. Cool, guys. So for the next 15 or so minutes, maybe a little bit more than 15, Lazan and I are going to be talking about industry-leading growth, profitability, and cash flow. So from a finance perspective, we want to engineer maximum growth, but we also want to make sure that growth translates into profitability, like Uwais mentioned now, and that profit translates into good free cash flow within the organization. I think from Catherine's very first session at the beginning, it was mentioned that you can't just grow and scale without regarding profit and without regarding cash. It's not necessarily a sustainable business model. And I think Uwais got all of us really excited about figuring out all of that. So Lazan, I want to ask the first question here and just kind of lead with, we've spoken about growth. This is Scale Up Con. It's all about, building a company that can move fast and grow and get big. But we've also now spoken about profit first. So, which metric for you is really the most important one? Is it growth in terms of how fast are you growing, or is it profit? How much profit are you making as a profit percentage?
No, I think for me personally, both of them are really important. I think when you speak to different entrepreneurs, you'll get different answers. It sometimes depends on what's important to them and on egos, because sometimes we like the big revenue figures and sometimes we like the positive profit figures at the bottom and on the bottom line. I think both are important. I think you can't have one, well, you can have one without the other, but I think it's important to focus on your growth, because to have consistent growth on your revenue line, but not showing the profit isn't really sustainable for your business. But I think also over time, if you are profitable currently, you'll only be able to sustain that profit if you actually continue to grow, as long as you do it in a controlled environment. So yeah, I think definitely both are important.
Love it. Healthy, balanced approach. I can't agree. That's really well put. So if we're talking about industry-leading growth and profitability and cash, I'm curious as to how you see those rates. Like, what is a good growth rate for a scale-up company? How would you define that? And what is a good net profit after tax kind of rate? Like, just for the audience to kind of get a feel for what are we talking about when we're speaking about industry-leading profitability, growth, and cash flow?
Yeah, I think it definitely depends on the industry, and I also think it depends on the size of the company. I think if there's, if you're maybe between 5 and 10 years in, showing revenue growth of about 20 or 30%, is a great metric. And I think if you're maybe younger than that, you may actually even see, depending on the industry, if it's high growth, you may see 40 or 30 to 40% growth year on year. I think on a net profit basis, I think one should always aim for a 10% net profit percentage. That's always healthy and, great to have. I think if it's more than 15 or 20%, then there's obviously a very good industry that you're in. I think it's Vern Harnish that says if it's more than 15%, you should take your profits and run, because at some stage, the competitors will figure out what you're doing. But it really depends also on what you feel comfortable with, how you want to run your company. Do you run it as a lifestyle company, or do you have external shareholders? So it all depends on the industry and what's important for you as well.
Thanks, Rizwan. That's a good thing to just kind of like put a number in the sand in terms of profit percentage, what to work towards. I think it's also Vern who says if a company is doing under 5% net profit after tax, and they're probably on life support. So always mention that 1% profitability, and 1% is in the green. Mark Cuban might give you the thumbs up after 90 days. But we want to try to actually get to at least 5%. Below that, it's unlikely that profit will translate into cash flow, because there's a lot of other elements outside of the income statement that also suck cash. And Rizwan and I are going to get into this a little bit just now. So we want to get the profit to at least 5% or more, 10% being a great benchmark. I love that. So Rizwan, I want to chat about this tool we often use around finance called the Power of One and the 7 levers. It's part of the scale-up methodology. If you guys have spent some time in the book by Vern, it's a really good tool to have a look at. You can find some good templates on it. But it basically argues that there's 7 levers that a founder or a management team can pull to increase profitability and cash flow within the organization. And the first 4 levers really influence both profit and cash, and the last 3 only cash flow. So it's basically around kind of increasing revenue, decreasing costs, or making your working capital cycles shorter. So Rizwan, can we just stand still on these kind of 7 levers, and the concept that if you can improve each one of them by just 1% over every period, like every quarter or so, you just improve them with 1%, it'll have an astronomical result at the end of the day in terms of how much free cash flow the company generates and how much profit they actually make. The first metric is obviously start at the top, kind of grow the top line, right? So there are 2 ways to do that. And the first one is basically to sell more, right? So to sell more of what you're currently offering in the market. Would you be able to talk to the tactics and tools that you see kind of being deployed to make sure that you increase your top line revenue by selling more to your core customer?
Yeah, I think you can obviously either sell more of your existing product or services, or you can expand your services that you have. So, if we firstly focus on sell more of your existing products, is to make sure that your existing clients are happy with the value that they receive and the quality of the product, because we should never underestimate that the value of word of mouth and what that can mean for your business. Obviously, marketing has a great impact on that as well, to increase your volumes. And I think when it comes to selling different products or on volumes, it's a great thing to look at your value chain that you're currently working on. So is there maybe something small that you can add to your product or to your value that you're currently giving, that a client is potentially getting elsewhere at the moment? So, something small like, can you personally deliver a product instead of getting a third party to deliver that? So that's definitely something to look at your value chain. And it's great to have a strategy session on that, because I think many times entrepreneurs focus on the one service that they are providing at the moment, and they don't really always, it's difficult to see the bigger picture. But I know, speaking of Profit First that you guys mentioned earlier, I know the Profit First book says focus on what you're really good at. So it's also about finding that balance. So I think that's on volumes, and then on selling price, obviously also focusing on what your client really needs, where they find value. I think if your clients find value in your product and in your service, then if you're going to make a 1% difference or increase on your price, they're not actually going to feel it. They're going to pay it with a smile if they're happy with your service and your product in the first place.
Brilliant, yeah. And I mean, because revenue is such a biggie, it's the biggest number on the income statement. Like if you're running at a 10% profit margin as an example, then that 1% increase in price could translate to a 10% difference in bottom line, which is massive, right? Then you, for Mark Cuban, you move from your 1% to 11% by putting up your prices with 1%. That's really quite exciting. And once you start doing those numbers with the power of one, I think it really becomes apparent, like, wow, small incremental moves on price increases, continuously selling more and managing costs really translate into exciting results for the bottom line. So then I guess if we're talking about it, so it's great to think about like increasing volume or increasing price to move revenue up. And there's a lot one can do in the way of that. But also, but what's even more in your control is your cost base, right? Like how much you actually spend, firstly directly and secondly indirectly. So let's talk about your cost of sales or your cost of services, your direct costs that are related to your core business. Lizanne, how can one think about managing that downwards?
Yeah, so I think what's important to remember there, firstly as well, Lo, is to make sure that whatever cost you are cutting is not compromising the service or the product that you deliver to the client. So that you still keep that at the same level. But it's always a good idea to have conversations with your suppliers to see if there's any discounts that you can negotiate, if there's any economies of scale that you can apply to have cost savings on that. And also for internal efficiencies on direct cost, if you may be in a service industry with staff and applying resources to that. I think that's on your direct cost. On your overheads in general, I'm a big fan of starting from scratch and really going through your expenses in a lot of detail. I think that, whenever I go through that process with a client, they always realize that there are subscriptions that they actually don't need anymore, or they're paying for Office 365 subs for staff that left a long time ago. So it takes time. It's painful. Many times you think, the odd 100 Rand here and there won't make a difference, but it all adds up. So definitely, I think it's definitely worthwhile spending that time and going through your expenses in detail and see what you can cut on, and also what's necessary, because as you say, those are the things that are within your control. It's easy to cut down.
Right, I love that. It makes me think of Marie Kondo. I'm not sure who has seen Marie Kondo clean a flat or a house. But what she does is she takes like all the clothes out of the cupboards, pile them onto the floor, and only the ones that spark joy get to go back into the cupboard. I think that's a really nice approach to do with your operational expenses, to like throw everything out, like Lizanne said now, and then from that whole big pile in the middle of the room, you choose which ones spark joy, which ones actually really contribute to the operations of the company, and only those ones do you allow back. And it's a lot. I think you'll get a lot more done in terms of the actual result than if you were to just go through everything top to bottom and think, do we need this? Yes, no. Do we need this? Yes, no. It's not quite the same. So you don't necessarily have to be as brutal necessarily as when COVID hit, like Wes mentioned earlier. But so it really helps to go through with a fine-tooth comb, like once a quarter, once a month, just literally look at the detail of your expenses and what you're actually letting flow out of the company. So Lizanne, thank you very much. If we're gonna, there's two different tactics to increase revenue, two different tactics to decrease cost, and that both applying those four levers will get you to a better profit at the end of the day. If we don't listen to Oasis, the revenue minus profit is expenses. If we take the old school accounting methodology of revenue minus expenses is profit, then that'll get us to a bigger bottom line by increasing our revenue and decreasing our cost, which is already an exciting metric. But then profitability is always going to be vanity if you're not able to translate that to cash. So the last three levers are all around generating free cash flow, and there's a couple of things you can do without moving your profit that can actually increase the amount of operational cash in the company. And those things are all around managing your debtors, creditors, and inventory. Lizanne, maybe can we first just chat about the debtors cycle, all the way from invoicing to recovering the cost from your clients? Like, how can one go about optimizing that? Because I guess the faster the cycle and the pulse can be from when you get a client to when the money's in the bank, if that's very short, that's quite exciting. If it's very, very long, it's quite difficult. You need a lot of cash to manage a very long revenue cycle. So how can one speed up the debtors process?
Yeah, I think there are so many different things that one can do. If you're in a service industry, it's definitely one of the things to look at is work with your clients on a retainer basis, like we do, for instance, at Outsource CFO, and get your invoices out as soon as possible. Try to get the majority or all of your clients on debit orders so that you don't rely on them making payment, but you can actually collect at a certain point during the month. I think there shouldn't really be any delays between, when a client has indicated that they want to go ahead with a service or buy a product and actually invoicing that client. You'd really need to work on that while it's hot, to get that out. And then definitely, following up on if you do reach a point of long outstanding debtors. I think maybe before that, there's the accounting systems and the cloud accounting systems that we have currently available to us are so great at sending automatic reminders to clients and so sending out automatic statements. So use all of those things to your advantage to make sure that you get your money in as soon as possible. I think if you do then get into a place where debtors have not paid, definitely to act on that as soon as possible. I had a conversation with insurers recently that basically insures your credit book, and they're saying definitely that they can see the longer that you wait to collect, the more difficult it is. So if you think, oh, you'll phone them next week or the week after, even those days can make a big difference. And I've, for instance, in one of my clients, the owner and main shareholder of the company is the person who follows up debtors. So she doesn't leave it to the accountants, but it has great results. So she has, very, very few long outstanding debtors, but she makes the time to phone people. And she said even just them getting an email from her inbox instead of an accounts at or whatever makes a big difference. So I think it's great to implement that personal touch there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think what regardless of what kind of business model you run, I think deploying the right tactics to make sure this cycle is as quick as possible. If you need to make sure that you're the person at the front of the line to get paid, and that the payments are coming in timeously from the clients. And the shorter you can make that cycle, regardless of whether it's products or services, the quicker cash flow comes into the company, and the quicker you can expand operations without taking capital, which is always quite exciting. Because on our last two levers are around kind of like slowing down creditors' days and also around inventory days. Like how can we slow down creditors and move inventory faster? Maybe just talk to us about those two a little bit, please.
Sure. So on your creditors or your suppliers, I find definitely the best approach there is to have a personal relationship with your suppliers and to keep communications open. Once again, to apply economies of scale, and through building that relationship, you can maybe negotiate longer payment terms. Unofficially, if you have 30 days, push it to 31 or 35. That doesn't necessarily help with the relationship, but rather keep the communications open. That's obviously a last resort to do that on your creditors. And I think with the inventory days, it all comes down to planning. It comes down to knowing your customer behavior when you need your stock. Definitely use the information that you have available to turn that into intelligence and act upon that to make sure that you don't sit with a warehouse full of stock and that you can move that quickly. So it's really about finding that balance in that process as well.
Thanks, Lazan. Yeah, there are some really amazing cloud inventory systems nowadays that you can amazing detail around inventory days of individual stock items and profit margin per unit of stock. It's really, really cool. If you're already running on a cloud system like Xero for your accounting, having an inventory system like an Unleashed inventory or something like that implemented and linked to that is really incredible. Like the information and the data that comes from that for management to make decisions with this is super exciting. Thanks, Suzanne. I mean, that power of 1 and 7 levers tool is really a favorite on this, and I think there's so much locked up in it for founder teams who want to grow profit and cash. So keep that in mind when you're striving to improve those two core metrics. Suzanne, I just want to get into, like, I think, doing the numbers, like running the finance, has a lot to do with the detail, right? So I want to hear kind of like, what are the details, like the key questions in the details that founders need to ask of their finance teams if they want to dig into like an increase in profit or increasing in cash? Like, what are those things that almost like profit per X unit that you would generally identify?
Yeah, I think some of the most valuable information that you can get from your finance team is to get really granular on your profit per X, as you mentioned. Whether that's profit per client, profit per type of client, profit per location, or profit per product. All that information that you can get, again, if you can turn that into intelligence, which can help you to make better decisions, you can improve your business on various levels. I recently had a situation with a client where they got a specific or a special sales consultant involved in their business who asked for a lot of details on their sales, and they did analysis actually for the client where they calculated that 28% of their profit is coming from 94% of their clients. So they've got a lot of it, but that's based on number of clients. So they have a large number of clients actually not contributing to a very big part of their revenue. And in the same instance, they did calculations, and they realized that their revenue per customer is actually very low, and their gross profit per customer is actually very low. And in that process, they realized that that's actually not the type of customers that they want to continue with. It's not the type of customers that will allow them to scale their company. They don't have the time and energy to service all those customers. So if they do want to continue with them, they'll definitely need to bring in a lot more automation. And that's the thing where if you do, all your spreadsheets and calculations, where things can get really exciting, because now the directors can go away and they can make decisions based on that. So
those light bulb moments, right? When the founders are like,
yes, exactly.
Wow, like it's the numbers have always been there, but now it makes sense, and now there's an actionable insight. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant. There's also one of our big topics was on people, right? And people are generally the biggest expense on most companies' income statements, whether it's product or services companies. Generally, people are a big part of the operational cost. So I just want to talk while we have the last few minutes, just around like, how do you maximize with client-facing or production-focused staff in a growth firm?
So I think there's a great ratio for all companies to do is something called a labor efficiency ratio. Labor obviously reminds us more of manufacturing. So in service industry, you can use a staff efficiency ratio if you like. And what you basically do is you take your gross profit and you divide it by your total staff cost. So you say for every R1 that I spend on staff, how much gross profit or revenue are they bringing in? And I had an experience a few years ago when I did this exact calculation for a client, and they said, of everything you've showed me, this is the most valuable ratio I've seen. Which is, it's great to see clients having that aha moment, but also in this industry where they were in marketing and they had a lot of staff that was very valuable to them. So in service industry specifically, that ratio is usually between 2.5 and 3, but it depends on your industry. So you need to determine what is ideal for your industry, or also what you feel is palatable for your company. And then obviously to again use, sorry, I sound like a broken record, but to use the information and turn it into intelligence to make good decisions on. So the things that you can, for instance, look at there is you can look at your people. So, if you have a very low ratio, what it will show you is that you probably need more skilled people, or you need to work on your talent of your people. You need to look at execution and the processes that you have in place. Or is it actually not your people in the execution? Is it actually on your strategy and the type of clients that you have in place? So, I think there are various ways that you can those three things: people, strategy, and execution, and what you need to tune to improve that.
That's an amazing summary. I love that. I would still love to ask you about cash flow forecasting, and I'd love to still speak about fundraising for a growth firm. But luckily, we had a fundraise con fairly recently, so I hope all of you guys had a look at that. If you haven't, I think it's on our YouTube channel, so you're welcome to have a look at that. There's a whole conference on cash flow and fundraising. Lizanne, just for the sake of time, I'm going to wrap us, but thank you so much for sharing your insights. I think that was crisp and concise. Really appreciate it. And thank you for everything you do at OCFO.
You're welcome. Thanks, Lau.
Brilliant. Nwabisa, can I ask you to jump on with me, please?
Hello.
There we go. Hey, how are you?
Good, thank you. And you?
Brilliant. So good. Thanks so much. It's great to have you here with us.
I'm very, very happy to be here and see so many people have taken the time out to come and share and exchange. And so I'm actually learning a few things myself whilst listening to some of the speakers.
Oh, that's grand, man. Thanks so much for being here with us, guys. We're very privileged to have Nwabisa here with us today. She's the head of partnerships at Branson Center for Entrepreneurship in South Africa, which is an incredible. Really excited about the conversation here with her today. And we're going to be focusing on like building an ecosystem around your company. So it's a concept that Mike Scott had an interview with Vern Harnish, who wrote Scaling Up a little while ago. You guys have to go look for his podcast on that. And one of his core things he was talking about was like, how do you create an ecosystem or like a plan around your company? People who are involved in the journey, who are passionate about it, who contribute to it by referring, by becoming clients, by becoming staff, etc. So those are kind of the things I want to talk to Nwabisa about, because I think she's one of the forerunners on this topic. But before we jump into that, Nwabisa, would you mind just telling us a little bit about Branson Center and the work you do in South Africa?
Absolutely. So the Branson Center of Entrepreneurship exists to change business for good. We really do believe that entrepreneurs have an incredible role to play in terms of driving innovation and at the same time solving for global challenges that affect us on a daily basis. And so for us, we're here to we exist to scale up entrepreneurs in a way that's positive for people, planet, and profit. And of course, we do this using the Virgin Way, following in the footsteps of our namesake, Sir Richard Branson. And so that's really what we're about.
Great. That's wow. That's pitch perfect. You must have practiced that. That's gorgeous. Thanks for sharing that. So I'm going to pose this big question to you. Like, how do you go about building an ecosystem around your company? If you're a scale-up founder, you want to create an ecosystem of like-minded people around the business. Like, how would you approach that?
So I think for me, first of all, it's saying that it's both an art and a little bit of a science. And so it's understanding that there's no formula, but at the same time, there are a couple of fundamentals that you can actually try and get into place and follow those brilliant basics. And hopefully you start to see an ecosystem growing around your business. And so for us, both as a Branson Center and even from my personal point of view, it always starts with purpose. If you're able as a business to articulate your purpose, embed your purpose in your business and see how your purpose plays out, in terms of your finances, your partnerships, your brand, suddenly that's easier for people to actually understand, hook into, and buy into that. It also then means that you've got a very clear sense of accountability that you've actually, articulated for your ecosystem, which is able to then either hold you to account or then understand when you make mistakes in your business because you start talking about, aligning yourself to your purpose. And then in terms of the very practical things, I think when we're growing our businesses, so many times we focus perhaps on business development or sales. I think it's very important to start thinking about getting the right people in your team who focus on partnerships or system building or community building, because that's not necessarily the same thing as sales. It will be an incredible driver towards sales. And, between your salespeople, your business development team, your marketing and comms team, and your partnerships team, you probably then will see a magical way of then driving growth in your business. And so from a partnerships point of view, which for me, the word I like to use instead of ecosystem sounds a bit scientific. From a partnerships point of view, it speaks about this idea that it's a two-way conversation. So you're actually talking about collaboration, co-creation, co-curation, and on some level, co-curiosity. So you actually are looking to your own ecosystem, asking the questions and also receiving feedback from your community, which then allows for your ecosystem to really be more plugged into what you're about and sometimes bring opportunities to you as you grow your business. Then from another point of view, it's about being consistent. So say what you mean what you say, act on it at all times. And suddenly people start wanting to coalesce around what is the sense of authenticity, genuineness. These things go a very long way. And then, of course, for us, obviously, as a Branson Center, be entrepreneurial in all that you do. So chase down those opportunities, explore, maybe be a little bit fearless, be a bit wild, but actually go out there and make sure that your community understands that we're all in this together. We're all chasing for the same solutions.
Maybe so I have to ask on that fearless front, are you going to Necker Island anytime soon?
If you have anyone who can give me a vaccination in the next little while, then to Necker Island in a blink.
Thanks, man. Wow, you've laid that out so well. Like I almost have no further questions on the topic. It's really good. So yeah, at the core of it is relationships, right? Relationships with people, which are these partnerships. So I guess then if you were to think of like helping those partnerships then scale over time as the organization scales, how do you scale a partnership?
So I think it always comes back to this idea that, your partnerships need to come from a place of being values aligned, which is why it's important to have that ability to have articulated your purpose to yourself, to your people, and of course to your community, because that starts then being able to, give you a sense check in terms of, am I even in the right partnership? Not every single partnership is for you. And I think obviously as entrepreneurs, sometimes we get that little shiny penny magpie syndrome where everything looks exciting, everything looks like a possibility. Once you start aligning to your purpose, you start making sense in terms of who do you need to have around you. Once you understand that, in terms of making sure that from the beginning, your partnership needs to exist as a conversation. Once you've got this conversation, you're able to understand how can we then help each other effectively? How can we be of benefit from each other? And so I always say that even in the beginnings of my conversations with potential partners is, I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to pitch anything to you. I want to learn about what bothers you, what keeps you up at night, what excites you. And based on that, we can start landing in a place of saying, right, this is where we intersect and this is where together we will grow. And so it's making sure that it is this, what you alluded to, that it is relationship driven. And based on that relationship, you can then start thinking about scale. And I promise you, you'll start seeing the results very, very quickly because it's about finding things that then delight us in this partnership.
I love it. It's such a refreshing difference to maybe like core sales methodology to just kind of get in front of this in as many leads as possible and convert them to clients. I love this partnership approach and focusing on the relationships first and co-creating something that works for everyone together. I think that's really, really exciting.
Sorry, just quickly, and I think for we did hear this word which started feeling quite horrible in terms of resilience. And so for me, once you start talking about relationships and you're looking after your relationships, you actually are effectively building resilience into your business because your relationships will carry you through both the good times and the tough times. Your relationships will also carry you through the times when you need to pivot or make different decisions in your business. But those relationships will be constant. And so resilience starts coming through relationships.
I love it. I heard a founder say at one stage, because he's been so focused on relationships with all of his stakeholders, when his business went through a really tough time, his clients didn't leave; they rallied behind him, and that was such a big impact. That's so amazing. Like when the company's having a tough time, clients don't just leave; they're involved in what you're busy with. They're bought into the purpose. So you figure out a way to work together. That's amazing. Just one last thing I want to ask you is just in terms of partnerships and big new conversations. Is there anything big in the pipeline with the Branson Center that we can look out for?
Absolutely. So in the next week or two, we'll be announcing our 10 entrepreneurs we'll be working with in our Food Waste Innovation Challenge. So the Branson Center, as I said, we really are focused on solving for challenges that speak to people, planet, and profit. And so zero waste, the circular economy are both, big challenges, and at the same time, massive opportunity lying there in terms of innovation, but also finding solutions. And so we partnered up with the United Nations Development Program with an arm of that called the Accelerator Labs, and they will be driving out a challenge looking at solving for food waste here in South Africa. And so we've just finalized our 10 entrepreneurs, and we'll be going to market to showcase them, announce them, we'll be working with them to scale them and get them ready for market and hopefully for investment. And so please, stay close to us and see if you can spot anyone that you know, and also, be there to be their community.
Brilliant. United Nations, that's a nice partnership to have. Well done. No, Visa, thank you so much. We're kind of running a minute or two behind schedule, so I'm going to hand over to Kobus. But thank you so much for taking time to be with us here today. It's been a pleasure listening to you. Really appreciate it. And good luck with everything you guys are doing in the way of meaningful, impactful work.
Thanks, Lo, and good luck to everyone as well. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, guys, second last session. Can I ask Kobus to please join me on stage? Mr. Ehlers, how are you?
I'm well, and yourself?
Great. I'm super well. Thanks so much. Kobus, it's a privilege to have you here today. We know founders like yourself, you guys are busy. For everyone who doesn't know Kobus, if there is anyone on this call, he's the founder of SnapScan, which most of us used to pay for a whole bunch of different things, including our much loved coffee. Kobus, thank you very much for the hard work and effort on that. Absolutely adore the product. And he currently also runs a company called Radar, because they've sold SnapScan to Standard Bank. Kobus, we're asking you the big question today around execution. Like, how do you get a company to run like clockwork? And I would imagine a payments company that runs with and sells to a big bank must really kind of like work like this. And I know also in your current business, you're also focusing on kind of like, standardizing complex processes and making them kind of like run like clockwork. So over to you, sir. Keen to hear what you have for us.
Sure. So I definitely don't know if I have the magic solution for how to make your company run like clockwork. It's a difficult question, but I do have some ideas and maybe 5 things I can share from our experience. I think there's also, as you also phrased it, I think there's an important difference depending on the life cycle of your business. It's definitely a different configuration when you start out to when you start scaling up and really growing that business. But I think there are some common themes that run through it for us. I think one of the most important ones, and maybe my first observation, will be that it's really important to set clear goals for what you're doing at any given time. That means maybe having a bit of a longer term roadmap and having context so that people in your business know why they're doing what they're doing. But then also those very annoying granular goals that give you an idea of what you should be doing this sprint, this month, this quarter, and this year. And of course, you can absolutely change them as you go along. But I think having some kind of idea of why we're doing it and where we're on our way to really helps in keeping people focused and getting things in order. I think for us also, what has been really maybe my most important tip would be the second one, which is just make sure that you have the best possible team that you can when you're building your business. I don't think there's anything more important than having really, really good people. And I think that applies to basically any business and any industry that you're in. So for me, when starting a business or when growing a business, it's really about working with people who you can trust and getting the best possible talent and skills available to you in that business. And that's not an easy thing to do. There, once again, isn't a magic solution to it. There isn't one service that you can go to that can help you with recruitment and solves all of your problems. It is a constant investment. It's about building networks. It's about also really getting to know yourself as a business and understanding what is a good fit for you. So when we hire and recruit, quite often it is not about finding the best candidate out there. It is about finding the best candidate for us. And to be able to do that, you need to be quite focused in terms of what your requirements are and what you need. Maybe the third thing to think about there is, how do you empower people in your business? When you say you want things to run like clockwork, for us, a lot of that is about reducing meetings and coordination and sign-offs and different levels in the business. So it's about saying, can we make that decision happen as close to the people executing on it as possible? And that means delegating authority. It means ensuring that your structure is in such a way that you don't have large bureaucracies in circumstances where it doesn't make sense. It's not the case in all situations. So if I take our current business, we still do a payments bit, disbursing salaries for employees. In those kind of contexts, of course, there is separation of duties, there's audit trails, there's quite formal processes, there's oversight, because that is fit for that purpose. When it is a decision in terms of changing the branding on a support page, that process is a lot more lightweight because it doesn't make any sense to put those heavy structures on top of it. So I think seeing if it's possible to empower your employees as much as possible really helps when you start growing. In my experience, generally, if you're 4 or 5 people in a business, it's almost never an issue because anything you want can get resolved by just getting everybody in a room and sorting it out. But as you start growing at sort of 15 or 20 or 50 people, you have to make sure that people understand what their roles are, which decisions can they make, and where does that responsibility ultimately lie. And hopefully most of the responsibilities in that business lie first and foremost with the teams. And sure, there's an oversight role for the management or the executive team, but make those decisions as close to the point where they need it as possible. I think the fourth thing for us that is important is automate. You've mentioned it a few times today, but I think really getting automation in place as early as possible is crucial. We're in such a privileged position today that technology can help us solve so many of these repetitive tasks that you have to handle as a business. And reducing that cognitive load and making sure that these things happen smoothly is really something that we can use software systems for. In fact, that's one of the key reasons why we started Radar. So what we do there is look at all of your HR and your payroll needs in one sort of integrated fashion. We don't do the kind of accounting side of things, but we say if you want to manage all of your employees, there are a whole bunch of processes and procedures and policies that we can automate. And by putting that in an easy to use online platform, it allows you to get those processes in place when you're 3 or 4 employees, and that grows with your business instead of trying to catch up when you're going through a due diligence process or you need to figure out how you're going to sustain your growth. So automate as much as you possibly can and leverage those amazing tools that are out there, a lot of which are really affordable and lightweight to get started with. And then maybe the last thing I'll mention, we only have so much time, but the last thing I'll mention is find a way to make your wins tangible. When we're working on building a business, it's sometimes so easy to get lost in the weeds and not take that time to celebrate what you are actually achieving and those wins that you have. So I think it is, if it's a product, it's about really understanding why you're doing development or building on a specific product and marking those moments when you release that to customers. If it's on service, it's perhaps having really close contact with those customers and understanding the feedback that they give you in terms of the service you provide. But I think pausing and reflecting on what you have achieved is as important as setting those long-term goals and working towards that and ultimately towards a sustainable business.
Sure, Cobus. That's a powerful session. Thank you so much for bringing it across so concisely. I love that automation processes. Just focus on getting those things right. Get your communication right. And yeah, it's stellar to hear you just kind of like articulated in this way. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's really a privilege to have you today, and so good to see you, man.
Thanks so much.
Cool. Good luck with Radar, guys. Have a look at it.
Thanks.
Okay, guys, one last session, our third session on execution and our last one for the day. Rahul, can I ask you to please join me on stage, please? There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rahul Jain. He is the co-founder of Peach Payments and an absolute all-star entrepreneur in the Cape Town ecosystem. Rahul, welcome. It's so good to have you here with us.
Thanks, Lo. Thank you. Thanks. And good to be here. It's hard to follow those stellar acts that we've just seen right now.
Brilliant, man. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom with us. I remember when we started out, when we were just 2 people in 2 desk spaces out in Woodstock. Peach Payments were already there. I think you guys were then 2 or 3 years into business already. You're almost on 10 years now, right?
Yeah, 9 and a half years now.
There we go. Yeah, and already then Peach Payments was was on a high pace and ready for ready to build a world-class company. So it's so great to see you guys now, just about 10 years in, kicking ass like the way you are. So yeah, we're very keen to hear you speak today. We're going to listen to Rahul talk about changing engines at 40,000 feet. I think that's a really applicable topic for today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Lo. So hi, everyone. As Lo mentioned, I'm Rahul, one of the co-founders of Peach Payments. Today, I'm going to try and share a few key takeaways that we've learned as we've been scaling our business. Honestly, this is a topic I can probably speak for a few hours on, but I'll try and fit within 10 minutes, our experience across 4 key areas of our business. And so before we get there, just a bit about Peach. We are an online payment service provider that enables any business to build payments into their digital stack. So in short, we help businesses get paid from their customers on their websites, in their apps, call centers, on the phone, email, SMS, the entire digital space. So, usually at this point, I like to say that if you shop online in South Africa, you're most likely paying with us. We started Peach back in 2012, and today we work with thousands of customers, merchants, businesses in South Africa, Kenya, Mauritius. And just to give you a sense of scale, in South Africa alone, we process over R1 billion a month on our platform, growing at about 100% each year. As we've grown over the past few years, we've kind of hit these inflection points that we call jet streams along the way. And these inflection points have been, periods of extreme growth in our business that have forced us to make radical changes to the way we execute in order to keep up and to make most of this growth that we see. So, back in 2015, and I think probably that's the period when Lo was also mentioning, it was just me and Andreas, 2 of us, and we grew 5x in that year. Yes, we started off a low base, but for the 2 of us, it meant we needed to hire more people, and we went to 5 people in the business, and that was already a big change for us. And May 2020 was one more such time that we rode this crazy jet stream created by this fundamental shift of consumers and users towards digital commerce. Yes, this was driven by COVID. People were worried about going to the mall, or we were in lockdown, but it forced people out of that comfort zone to experience digital commerce, and that's been a fundamental shift, that we're continuing to benefit from even today, as you can see. Now, as we grew exponentially over some of these inflection points or through these jet streams, we realized that what we've been doing in all these years is kind of changing out these engines of our jet plane while we're cruising at 40,000 feet. So from a Peach Payments perspective, we looked back and we identified 4 key areas of our business that had seen or would be impacted by growth and would need some change. And these were product, people, processes, and partners. So over the past 8 years, we've had to swap out each of these engines, and some of them a few times already. Probably Cobus can agree to this one, but as a tech founder, you're constantly innovating. You need to innovate, you need to build new stuff, you need to bring new innovation to market. You're like a great white shark. If you stop moving forward, you could die. However, as you're scaling the business, your tech needs to scale as well. As a founder, the 2 words you kind of start to dread in this journey are technical debt and refactor. Every time someone brings that up, it still sends shivers down my spine. But what we realized was, the system and the product and the platform that we built for the first 100,000 transactions, kind of hit its limits when we started to do 1 million transactions a month. And what we really needed now was to refactor some of these systems to get them ready to handle the next wave of growth. Now, we really wanted to build new stuff, but at the same time, we really needed to rewrite some of these core systems. And I definitely didn't appreciate or understand this need. Looking back, I'm kind of glad I listened to our product and engineering teams. But as an example, we have this product where we allow businesses to send payment links to their customers to pay for any product or service through email or SMS or WhatsApp or however these links can be delivered. As businesses started to use these links, we realized we needed to add more features to it. At some point, we realized we needed a fundamental shift in this product completely. And at that point, if I look back, it was one of the hardest decisions to make, because that meant we had to drop something else in our development pipeline to get to kind of move this product from band-aids and spit and mud to a bit more refined and a bit more stable, and ready to handle the next wave of growth. So moving forward, we now actively plan for capacity for maintenance and for refactoring. In our quarterly prioritization for our product roadmap, we actually budget and account for tech debt and refactoring. And this was actually the first case or area of our business where we started to use this term of how we're swapping out engines at 40,000 feet. The next area of the business, that we came to realize was people. This is one of the probably the second most important, or in fact the most important engines that drives your business forward. And as we grew the business, and as the demands on the business grew, the demands on our team also increased. When you're a small team, you're hiring a lot of generalists, people who can and are willing to pitch in everywhere. As we scaled, not everyone who was great in a 10-person startup will thrive with the same skills in a 70+ people business. So we realized that we needed to get a bigger engine. We needed the right people in the right roles. We needed to help our team evolve. We had to train them. We had to upskill them. And we also needed to make sure that the new people we were hiring fit the requirements of the business today, not for the future, not what they were in the past, but that could help us continue building the business in the stage it was today. Customer support is an area where we passionately believe in, was completely overlooked in Africa, and something that we really put a lot of effort behind. And for us to scale support, I've always said to our team that if a merchant calls us, that's the time when they need us the most. So we should be able to answer the phone and help them. So that meant rejigging our operations team. We now operate 3 different areas in our business. Within operations, we have onboarding, we have support, and we have risk. So, this team might look completely different 2 years from now, but this is what I mean by, swapping out the people engine. The third aspect that goes almost hand in hand with people is processes. Processes are almost like the lubricant that keeps these new engines humming. And as a startup founder, introducing structure and processes feels like it kind of goes against the grain of being a startup. You constantly feel, oh, are we becoming too corporate? But you do realize that without well-defined and engineered processes, it's really hard to keep the entire business moving in the same direction. And we learned this, by fire, by trial, but we're focusing quite a bit now in making sure, that we have the right processes, not over-engineering it, not creating bottlenecks. As Cobus mentioned, trying to move the decision closer to where the execution really happens. And this is something we'll have to redo again in 2 years' time if we continue to scale, and grow according to our plans. The last engine that we think about continuously is partners. We've been fortunate that we picked partners that were not only suitable as we scaled, but enabled us to scale further. And this was one of our key takeaways. How do we find partners that can enable our scaling? One choice we had very early on was, do we build business systems with our own hardware and in a local data center, or do we go to a public cloud like AWS or GCP? And today, as a cloud native business, I'm glad we picked AWS because it's one less thing to worry about. There are trade-offs with every decision, but it's something that's paid off well for us. So we worked with startups that are now multi-million rand businesses. And one of the things that we learned through our own experience, and it pushed us to make sure that we are a partner for our customers that enables their scaling and not just support it. So just to recap, the 4 areas that we swapped out in our business continuously: product, people, processes, partners. And we're fairly sure that as we continue to grow, amidst all this certainty, what is clearly certain is we're going to have to swap out these engines again very soon. Hopefully this time we'll be a bit better prepared. We'll plan for this significant maintenance, before it threatens our flight. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Rahul. Thank you very much for sharing this Peach Payments journey with us. It's very exciting to see. It's also at the same time, it's hectic, right? How this process just continues to, to evolve. And it makes you think of the flywheel that Ian mentioned in the beginning. Like at first it's a small flywheel and it turns slowly, but it gets bigger and it gets momentum. And before you know it, it's a really fast growing company that are doing some amazing things. But even then, there's still, every year or two, you have to revamp almost everything in the company. So I think, building a scale-up company is probably one of the hardest jobs on earth, but I think it can be one of the most rewarding ones if you really apply the right tools and methodologies and techniques. So thank you for being here with us today. Thank you for sharing this. And just from all of us in the audience, also just a big thank you to you and the Peach Payments team for backing this event, guys. Peach Payments are our diamond sponsor for Scale Up Con this year. We're very grateful to have you guys on board with us, supporting entrepreneurs. And I know that everyone all the growth founders on this call are going to be having a look at the Peach Payments platform to process their next transaction.
Thanks, Lo. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good to have you guys. That then brings us to the end of our agenda for the day. We were going to see if we ended up with a little bit of time in the end. We're going to have a chat with some of our speakers, but we have now run out of time. So we're going to cap it for today. We have Founders Conference coming up in November. I think in Global Entrepreneurship Week, which is normally around the middle of November, Outsource CFO hosts their flagship event, which is called Founders Conference, which will be probably even a longer format, large scale founder directed content piece that we'll put together, bringing some of the best entrepreneurial speakers from around the world to have a chat with you guys. But from our side, from me, from everyone at Outsource CFO, thanks for the time and energy to be here today. And good luck with your scale up journey. We will be right there supporting you guys. And we look forward to touching base with you soon as we follow each other's scale up journeys. All the best.